Some students have been sharing with us that they've been having a hard time in that they're using substances, smoking weed, drinking alcohol, using other substances more than they were before now that shelter in place orders have been in place, and even now with businesses opening with restrictions, a lot of people are still spending most of their time at home. So I just wanted to give you a few tips that will hopefully be helpful in managing your substance use, if that is part of your lifestyle and if you find yourself having any issues with it recently. Um, Substances are tricky because they release dopamine, among other things, into our system. And dopamine, you've probably heard of it, is kind of the reward chemical of our brain system. And substances release heavy amounts of dopamine into our system. Other activities release dopamine and other feel-good chemicals as well. Um, However, they release them at much lower levels. So activities like eating a really good meal, having a really great conversation, sex, masturbation, working really hard at a project and completing it, and maybe even getting good feedback about it. All these kinds of things release a good amount of dopamine, but they just can't compare to the artificial flood of dopamine that substances release into our system. So it can get tricky in that sense if our brain starts getting more and more used to those heavy amounts of dopamine and the other chemicals that go along with that. So if you do find yourself using more while you're at home a lot, there are a few things you can do to help manage this. One thing is to just make sure that you are engaging in activities that are releasing other sources of dopamine. So some of the things I mentioned, exercise is a big one of them, absolutely. And it might be limited in that gyms aren't accessible right now. So finding ways to work out at home, maybe buying a jump rope for $5 or $10 and doing that. That's some great cardio. Or going for a jog while maintaining social distancing, of course. Doing some non-weight related workouts while watching some YouTube videos with some exercise routines at home. You might want to cook yourself a really good meal or even a mediocre meal and eat it, and that can be rewarding and it tastes really good. Another thing you can do is just call someone, whether it's to talk about yourself or let them know that you're struggling in that moment if you feel close enough to that person, or saying, hey, I was thinking about smoking weed, but I'm really trying to cut down. Just chat for a few minutes. You can even call them to see how they're doing. Getting out of your own head is a great way to distract from using substances. Any other kinds of projects might be helpful too. Art projects, even arts and crafts. Picking up some hobby that you've maybe thought about or not thought about before, but that might be fun. A key piece in this also is to be mindful of those moments where you are feeling that urge to smoke weed or have a drink or whatever it might be, because that's kind of the crossroads at which you can make a decision at each point. And sometimes you'll decide, no, I want to smoke a bowl and relax a bit, or I want to have a drink, I want to have a glass of wine or whatnot. But at other points you can go the other direction and you can say, you know what, I'm going to take this opportunity to try something else out. And who knows, maybe as you start to make that decision on any given number of times, then that'll start to build up your confidence that you might not need to use as much as you feel like you need to use. Another piece I think is really important during COVID-19 and shelter-in-place orders is just the respiratory and physiological part of substances. This is more for chronic ongoing use, especially with smoking a different number of substances. That puts you more at risk for respiratory distress. And seeing as COVID-19 really can mess with your respiratory system, and it's focused a lot on your respiratory system, it can put you more at risk for that. If you do catch it from someone, you're at an even higher risk in that case. So that's important to keep in mind. And even with all these tips in place, if you find yourself struggling and you've tried some of these things and it's just not working, you can always go to the other parts of our website. You've found this video on our website, but you can go to our resources page in the alcohol and drug section under the self-help section. And we have a lot of different resources there with professional support, non-professional support like 12-step meetings. And you can also reach out to us and schedule an appointment. You can request me, but all of us are able to assess for substance use disorders or any issues surrounding substances, among many other issues, if you just give us a call. So check out those resources.